everyone, my name is Rebecca. I'm a fish biologist, ichthyologist, PhD student, and I actually specialise in Loricariidae or plecos and looking at their evolution. So this is a sort of very quickly made PowerPoint video just to understand the phylogenetics of Loricariidae. So phylogenetics is really useful for understanding evolutionary relationships, and it can also infer how different species might need certain care depending on where they place phylogenetically. So, it's gonna jump, sorry, but so the slides are just, I don't know why. So what is phylogenetics? Phylogenetics, this is my sort of own definition, but it's looking at the evolutionary connections, evolutionary relationships between different taxonomic groups. So that might be species, genera, families, phylum, smaller groups, even within the same species, maybe different localities, varieties. It doesn't have to be just wild species, it can be domestics. You could be looking at different dog breeds and how they relate to each other, which originates from which, and it does generally produce a tree, but it doesn't have to be. And although the word is phylogenetics, it doesn't have to be using genetics. It is a hypothesis, each tree, so it's kind of based on assumptions. This is what we think, how these species are related, and this changes over time. And there's several methods we get this data from to produce these trees. So one of the most popular at the moment is molecular. So this might be nuclear DNA, so usually particular genes, usually one or two, three, maybe one. It really varies on the study. And so the nuclear DNA is within the nucleus of the cell, and that contains its own set of DNA. Next one is the mitochondrial DNA. This is most well known as, largely, I think it's now debatable, being maternal origins. So it largely originates from the female line. This can infer a different relationship to the nuclear DNA, and each gene can infer its own phylogenetic tree because they kind of have their own evolutionary relationship. So kind of there is assumptions when it comes to using molecular. There are studies using whole genomes, so you could be using the whole nuclear genome or the whole mitochondrial genome. I believe the mitochondrial genome tends to be a lot smaller. Mitochondria, if you're not quite familiar with what it is known as the powerhouse of the cell, but it's these little units. Their origins are a bit like, well, they're quite interesting actually, but it does have its own DNA because of these evolutionary origins. Next, is it going to jump? Probably is. Morphological phylogenetics, my favourite. So this is done in many different methods of it, and it's the most historic. So as long as we've really thought about species, as long as we understood organisms, we've been thinking about how they're related to each other. And I guess ever since understanding evolution, but then also Linnaeus and taxonomy has really looked at how different species are related. So there's many different methods of this. So one of the newest methods I would say is quantitative methods. So one of the most common you're going to see is geometric morphometrics. So here's some examples. So this is Panac Cotyledon. And I've got my calipers that do not work because I can't get the battery out. But it's showing some sort of standard measurements. So these are kind of the traditional morphometrics I'm showing here, but kind of these are the measurements you might do if you're doing geometric morphometrics. You're measuring between different spaces. So this is the more traditional method. This is their predorsal length, a kind of very vaguely badly done one. But you can see you're measuring the different lengths, and whether that infers the sort of proportions infer different relationships, because you're not really looking at the length itself, because obviously that has developmental biases, but you're looking more at the percentage compared to other things. This is also used for taxonomic descriptions, but you might be using other sort of geometric morphometrics. So, and here is eye width. So so you'll be looking mostly at, so landmarking is the main one, which is looking at, so obviously you've got those traditional geometric morphometrics, which is between two different landmarks. You might also look at where different landmarks place. You might have a lot more landmarks, and this is really great when it comes to computers. You could do a lot more different landmarking to kind of see how different features place differently on different species, and then infer relationships from that method. The next is sliding landmarks. So just editing this back now with a sort of a better example of sliding landmarks. So this is Lacin cistrus. It's an undescribed Lacin cistrus either way, and I've provided another photo of it, I think, elsewhere in this PowerPoint. Anyway, so the sliding landmarks here are just going over the shape of the head. It can be any sort of anatomical part, whether it's bone or the body shape itself, and it's just starting and ending at the same anatomical point, going round or sort of outlining it with an equal number of individual landmarks spaced equally apart. There's plenty of programs that do this, and this is just to make sure it's sort of standardized across all of your specimens, so regardless of species. So you kind of have to bear in mind how many landmarks you're going to use depending on how many species you've got. Viso, which is a sort of software for looking at CT scans. So the next method for getting data for phylogenetics to compare different species is I've put in quantitative twice. I mean qualitative, and I'm not going to edit that because it takes too much time. But this is the presence or absence or change of different traits. So whether a trait might be curved, might be pointed, might be absent altogether, whether it's this shape, that shape, triangular, square, round, whatever, something like that, and you give it sort of numbers, and you can then compare these, whether these traits are present or absent, whether it has an adipose fin or doesn't. And all of these molecular, morphological are making assumptions on what is actually a valuable feature for understanding, for whether it's got phylogenetic evolutionary relationships, or it's more functional. So whether a species has evolved this feature for functional benefits, which is sort of like feeding, breeding, movement, something like that. So then once you got the data, you need to work out how to compare it. So these are some of the well-known ones. Parsimony is the easiest to understand, and the only one I'm going to explain because the other ones are a little bit more difficult to explain. So parsimony is just the assumption, kind of like the one with the least assumptions must be true. So the least amount of changes between two species must be most closely related. What's it? Occam's razor sort of thing. And all of these different methods also have their own analysis. That having done a lot of maximum likelihood and parsimony, bootstrapping is one of the main ones to work out which is the most reliable tree, because all of these will produce many different trees because they're all trying to calculate which is most reliable, and bootstrapping or for Bayesian analysis it will produce another one just to work out which is the most which branches, which nodes are most reliable. So how many times out of the 1,000 trees that you've produced that outcome appears. So it's not that simple, and there's different ways of saying which is the most reliable really, but this is when it becomes more mathematical and theoretical, and it's very interesting. And as you can this is kind of why so many phylogenies produce different outcomes sometimes, because you're each making assumptions on this as well as on the data, because all of these, so these have different theories attached to them, or mathematical models, and the bootstrapping really helps out there. But some clades are particularly weak when it comes to it. So first, before we even look at Loricariidae, let's look at the larger group. And people get really worked up on this. Loricariidae plecos are catfishes. They're within the group Siluriformes. So here I have Panac nigrolineatus, I believe. And you can see here that, well, it's a catfish. They have barbels. You can't really see them at the mouth there. It's just one of dermal plating, I guess. It doesn't have to have their... Catfishes don't have scales, but... Okay. So, let's look at the phylogeny. So, this was one that actually came out today. So, this is 2023. And you can see this is the... so, this phylogeny was produced to look at the whole of Actinopterygii. And so, that's very finned fishes. And it is a little bit debatable in certain aspects, I guess, and it is only, well, brand new. But if we look here, we can look at the different clades. So these are Loricariidae, and these are Siluriformes, and you can see here they there's quite a bit, and there's different. Obviously, there's different topography. So topography is the actual placement of the tree. Just looking at my time. Oh, this is going to be a long video. But there's different sort of tree topographies, tree visualizations. What is definitely doesn't change any assumptions is you can flip these nodes. So you could flip that. So you flip there. And it doesn't make any difference really to a tree. And it's a good way to visualize it. And you can see here where Loricariidae has come off. So here we have, so this is the most closely related groups to Loricariidae. So if people are saying Loricariidae plex aren't catfish, firstly you have to boot them out. You'd have to boot Callicridae out. And Callicridae is, I've not included a video of. Okay, so I've added in the video, and this is what Callicridae is most well known for, if it's going to work. Next slide. Is these guys. So these are the lovely Corridors. This is Corridors bethanae, a very quick video of Corridors bethanae. And this is one that I worked on a paper with. So Callicridae. So these are basically one of the very closely related taxa to Loricariidae to plecos, and you can kind of see it in that dermal plating. So let's actually look in more to Loricariidae then, because this is Siluriformes catfishes in general. So Loricariidae itself, here we have a beautiful Loricariidae. I think this might have been Similus at the time, but I cannot remember actually. So I'm going to mostly focus on my favourites, so Hypostominae, but let's start out further out for now. So this is Roxo 2019, and this is one of the best, Roxo et al. 2019. This is a really good paper for looking sort of at the broader picture. It's very clear. So here we have at the edges, there's a few more subfamilies. So Loricariidae, as I've said, plecos are split into several subfamilies. We've got Deltaurinae at the bottom. This has missed out Lithogene. Maybe that's the only one that's missed out actually. But so we've got Deltaurinae at the middle. I think they're mostly Brazilian species. You don't see them in the aquarium trade anymore. I've never seen the specimen. I cannot access it. Actually, no, I've seen a CT scan. It's not the clearest. Rhinlepinae is next out. That's the yellow one. That is check its recording. So that's like Pseudorhynlepis, Genobarbus, and also L95. Then next, branching out as we go further. And remember, phylogenetic trees aren't talk about most evolved. These are just talk about where they've branched out. And it's not, so you can't say one is more primitive, one is more basal, because you can't say one clade is more evolved than another, because they're still around, so they've not died out. If you stop evolving, you're gone. So I think, so that kind of works. Or, so it's not like Loricariidae isn't particularly evolved in comparison to Hypostominae. So yeah, obviously you've got Loricariidae in green, that's your whiptails, your twig catfish, your royal whiptail. Next in red we've got Hypostominae, that's the well-known plecos, that's like Hyponcistrus, Ancistrus, Ketostoma, stuff like that. Well-known popular species. Then Hypostominae, this is not well known as a pleco. These are Ottocinclus, Astridium, Hypopotoma. So I generally call them like the Ottocinclus lot in a way, because so many get called giant Ottocinclus, something Ottocinclus, Ottocinclus this, Ottocinclus that. They're the miniatures. Most of these are very small, but there is so I think Plecostomus. So that clade there is paraphyletic, which means a paraphyletic, it would be an example if you call plecos only certain. So most people's definition of a pleco is Rhynlepinae, some of Hypostominae, maybe some of Hypostominae, but it ignores entire groups. Another example would be dinosaurs. To say dinosaurs and exclude birds would be, I guess, yeah, paraphyletic, because you're excluding, or polyphyletic actually. So it would be polyphyletic because you're only including certain, certain species, but not the common ancestor. If it was paraphyletic, we don't really have the common ancestor for these clades, so it's really difficult. But I guess if you're saying Pseudorhynlepis is a pleco, it would be paraphyletic, because that is more basal, or branches out more basally would be better. So branching out much earlier. So if this is a pleco but not this, it would be paraphyletic, I guess. It just doesn't make sense, because you're just picking and mixing, and when you pick and mix, it's not really the best sort of it, because who knows what someone's talking about when it comes to that sort of thing. Oh, there we go. So let's focus a bit more on some of these clades. So here we have one of the best papers for a bit more detail. So this is Lujan 2015, or Lujan et al. 2015. So this clade really, this phylogenetic tree really goes into a lot more detail for a lot more species. I really like it, and it's quite a good reference paper. It's got quite reasonable, bootstrapping, what's the word? Oh, I don't know. I can't get, so where it's got low sort of ranking, that's the word I have to use till I remember, is the red, and also when they're in italics, it has low ranking for like 2 different systems from memory. So bootstrapping and Bayesian analysis is quite low. Low ranking, no. So just, it's not support, so it's not got high support. But you can see there's quite a lot. There's a lot of debate here. But so first we're going to go through, so we've got, so this is Corridorinae, so this is Corridorus. Would also be, no, because I think, oh blimey, I've not even looked at, I've not actually looked at, what's it? I've not looked at Calictidae for a while, so this is why am I saying Aspidorus, Scleromystax. I think they're in, no, they are in Corridorinae, they're just in Loricariidae. I did these for my undergraduate thesis, and then I realised I'm not very good at them. So, and then for the rest of the Calyctidae, you've got Calyctidae. So that's like Hoplosternum is probably the most well-known. Remember, there is also Dianema. And Megalichus is actually probably the most common of that subfamily. But people don't even talk about them. So, going up, Gastroblepus, do we see them in the aquarium hobby? Not really. I think they're definitely a hill stream species. They're like very high velocity. They actually like it a bit more than most Loricariidae. So here we got Phylogenetic. Don't see them in the aquarium trade. Very unusual. Hemispilichthes, don't see them. Pseudoancitrus gensitica. God, it's one of those. This shows how weirdly named Pseudoancitrus is because it's all across the phylogeny. You'll see it everywhere. It's very bad named, but it's a very weird fish. So this is a so you'll see it in the aquarium trades occasionally. They're very brightly marked. I don't have any videos, I don't have any photos, but you can look it up. Beautiful fish, but very strange where it places taxonomically, and I think other studies have found that it just doesn't, it's not normal. Pseudovine lepis, and vine lepis, that's vine lepinae mentioned earlier, so L95. That's a very deep-bodied fish compared to Pseudovine lepis genibarbis. And there's quite a few studies looking at their swim bladders. Going up, we have Loricariidae, and this is quite a diverse one, and I really need to look into their phylogeny a lot better, because it's one that a lot of people really like. I don't really understand why, but these tend to be a lot more elongate, and I kind of split them into two, so it's just going to be easy to... please... Is record. Why is it not doing? Ah, there we go. Oh, no, it's gone too far. Ah, why is it doing that? So, let's start that bit a little bit again because editing. So I split these guys into two when this appears. So here we have the lovely Lamnichthyes filamentosus, and you can actually see Lamnichthyes lunaro behind, and you can see the kind of morphological differences between them, and there's actually another filamentosus there. So these are obviously elongate. These are the ones that actually, they rasp on surfaces like normal Loricariidae, you could almost say. But they are that elongate figure, a lot like Stomosoma and Stostomates, which are the royal whiptails. And also they do look a lot like Phylogeny without that long nose, which are the twig catfishes. These are a lot more like what you'd consider a pleco. And then next we have this charming Hemiodontichthyes aspenserinus. So these are not, these videos are all going to have sound because I haven't managed to silence it, but these are the substrate dwellers. They do not have that suction cup mouth. They tend to have reduced teeth, reduced jaws in a way. And they are dwelling in the substrate, around the substrate. They need that sandy surface, and they have some brilliant camouflage. So this guy almost looks like the sand. This is a very diverse genus with only one species, that Aspenserinus, kind of with the same name as, I wonder if it is named after sturgeon, because you can see that long nose there. But these are very interesting. They're often, well, mostly like, well, understand their diets is maybe a little bit more complicated. Some seem to maybe be more tritivores, feed on algae and stuff in the substrate. Others might be feeding on seeds or invertebrates. It's very difficult to say, but they're really interesting fishes. I've well, obviously this is one I've worked with. Not all my videos are fishes I've worked with, but I've also worked with Pseudohemiodons, that's the chameleon whiptail, and also some other Pseudohemiodon, and also the scientific specimens, obviously. Pseudohemiodon apithanos is probably the most well known, and AF apithanos, because their colour changes are amazing. And then, so going out again, so let's go next on. And you can see almost there is, you might notice that the previous phylogeny, Roxo 2019, actually flipped these two. And that's because they're kind of like sister clades. You can't really say, there's no sort of like, you don't put one higher than the other. It kind of, you put it more logically. It's really difficult to explain, but it kind of makes it easier to see a phylogeny if you flip a clade. It doesn't actually make a difference to the phylogenetic relationships, the evolutionary relationships. So the next one is Hypostominae. So these are the miniatures, and I do have photos of the larger one. So the Parahaxis Cameroni. Is that spelt wrong? Or maybe it's another one, but these guys are quite big. They're sort of 15 centimetres, 10-15 centimetres. I think they can get larger, but the majority of this clade, this group, is very small. Oxyropsis, absolutely, like, I think, what was it, 2 centimetres? And then Otosynchus isn't there. Oh no, there's Otosynchus. And these are just, they're evolving towards miniaturization. This is the weird clade. So you'll see they used to be their own subfamily, and then it got placed in there because it didn't, otherwise you kind of want a monophyletic group is the easiest way to word it. So you want all the members to be within that clade. You don't want it skipping out a clade. So if you think of reptiles but excluding birds, if you get what I mean. And it isn't ideal, but it can never exist because nature doesn't follow our rules. But these are really small, and for when people say how big, what's the smallest pleco, you just look here because they're so tiny. The smallest I think is Neoplecos, maybe it is, or Nanoplecostomus eleanori was one at 1.8 centimetres. So the sizes for Loricariidae are massive. But here we have a famous one. This is Otosynchus cococama, a very attractive Otosynchus. It is a Hypostominae, and you can see how it looks like a miniature pleco. These have the same odontos, those hairs you see in the larger species. You just need to kind of microscope to see it. These are algivores mostly, but very different jaws. They're very social. I think this clade, I've never seen an adult, I've never handled a Parahaxis, so I can't really say about how social they are. But most of this clade seem to be shoaling, social, great fishes, but a bit more sensitive dietarily. At the back we got Panaculus albomaculatus. Epistogramma. These are the ones that... I can't remember. And I should know. Ignore these guys here. These are Pteroplectus riberi. They were just in the same tank. They're babies, so they're not going to really cause any issues, but these guys do grow to about 20 centimetres, 17 centimetres standard length. They are related to the common and sailfin plecos, Gibiceps and Paradalis. They technically are common plecos, they've just been given a fancy name for now. But here we have Astridium, so this is also a Hypostominae, but it looks like Loricariidae. It's so elongate. It is a Hypostominae though. It's just that sort of convergent evolution, and there's so many traits they probably share, but it might be more there. So convergent evolution, evolving towards a shared anatomy to fulfill a niche, and actually it is more complicated now, I believe, but that's kind of the easiest way to say it. So that's basically the other subfamilies we don't really talk about because, well, to be honest, these two are extremely popular. They're reasonably large. But I could do a whole video probably about Loricariidae more easily than these guys. Most of Hypostominae, you don't really see a lot of them in the trade. I've seen, obviously, so this is now Rhinotosynchus, that's Epile. I have got footage of it on my channel. Parotosynchus, have I? I think I do have Parotosynchus. I do have Hypopotoma. Actually, I have quite a few, but not really enough of that. And that Astridium I posted, that is, oh, it's not Martini though. It's another Astridium. No, I can't remember the name. So going upwards, you can see these are the other subfamilies. This is Hypostominae, so this is the best subfamily, and you can see it's diverse. And Loricariidae, we just talk about the number of species. There's 1,040 species currently, probably more since I looked at that number. But Hypostominae is the largest group. So the first one that branches out from the others is the Chaetostoma clade, and most of these we don't really see in the trade. So Cordylanthistris, beautiful wide-bodied, I really like the wide-bodied unusual species. And Dolichostris we don't really see either. Actually, I think there has been some revision because I handled a specimen of that was labelled as Dolichostris, or was it Cetosis, and it's now a Cordylanthistris. But looking at it, there is that sort of paraphyly. So you can see here, Cordylanthistris, and then here. So with Leptoanthistris in a way, it's not really, it's kind of, that's why they've got the abbreviations. My grammar or knowledge of English is not the greatest. But most of these we do know Chaetostoma quite well. This is the rubber-nosed pleco, and here we have Chaetostoma 455, SPL 455. It's actually in with Panac, not Panac. So these are Baroncistrus Demantoides. But you can see they've got that very soft, very like Ancistrus wide head, so more like the Hillstream Ancistrus. There's actually both variants here of this. Just going to play it. And it's got that soft sort of end to the head, wide head. There is a little bit of variation, but they're quite interesting. This is probably the brightest marked species you'll see. And they do vary in size, so this is probably the... these are one of the smallest ones, but I have seen them up to 30 centimetres or more, and you can look up Pyroquatics' one. There is a video on YouTube of them. Oh, well, the one they imported. And you can see his little face there. They're quite sweet, although they're not really, they're quite nasty. So going up, we've got Astrinae. So this was originally a tribe, and you can see the tribes don't really work because Astrinae and Cistrinae used to include, I would say, I think it's all of these here. But the original tribes are based maybe on older phylogenies. So Ancistrinae includes quite a few well-known members, but there's none more well-known than Ancistrus. So here we have a member of Ancistrus, and I'm not going to choose the common Brisonose. This is Ancistrus agaboensis. I believe it's a Brazilian species. Look at these beautiful spots. I only record videos very shortly just to show what they look like. So wider Ancistrus, but there's so much diversity. I think there's around 50 described species of Ancistrus, but there's definitely much more needing described. It's generally defined by its tentacles, but you can see here I've chosen this one because it's got very small tentacles, but there are species without tentacles and very small tentacles, very large tentacles, and not sexually dimorphic tentacles. Those that lack tentacles used to be called Xenocara, but it's kind of, I guess, not really a reliable way of diagnosing Ancistrus. So you can see here it's quite a distinctive, well, genus, and it's very diverse though. So their diets do vary, their care requirements vary. They're found throughout many areas of South America. You get cooler water, hill stream species, and also warmer waters that are still, they seem to be largely higher velocity fishes, but there's ones that really look like Chaetostoma, the rubber-nosed plecos, in their appearance. So these are often known as the bristle-nosed plecos, and you see they place well within Loricariidae. So you can't say bristle-nosed catfishes aren't plecos or catfishes. So then others in this group, if we go out, the sister clade to Ancistrus is Lassi Ancistrus. So these doesn't have the tentacles and often has dermal plating to head. There's actually an Ancistrus agaboensis there. But they've got dermal plating, so that plating like this all the way to the head, which Ancistrus doesn't have. It has that very soft head in most species, not all. And the males will have larger odontos down there, and you could kind of see that sort of hairy appearance around the head, and it can get particularly large. This, I'm not entirely sure which species Lassi Ancistrus, but I think it's Lassi Ancistrus. Oh god, I'll leave it just on that. I have my own ideas on what it is. I mean, it was imported as an Ancistrus, but you can see it's not, but it doesn't really have you can't see the distinctive Lassi Ancistrus tail, which is a bit like that in appearance. There we go, so that's Lassi Ancistrus, sister to Ancistrus. And then out from Ancistrus, I don't know why I'm doing it this way, I just am. Got Pseudolithosus, and the most famous member of this is Pseudolithosus anthrax. You can see this is certainly one used to velocity. It's a very flat fish. It's actually reasonably wide. These one of the most distinctive aspects of Pseudolithosus is these long pectoral fins. It's quite an interesting species. There's other ones. So this is anthrax, the anthrax pleco. It has another name, I think. Another common name, but there's also, you might see tigrinus around, which has very different markings. The other closely related species you don't see. And there's so I'm ignoring kind of clades I don't have videos or photos for. Largely we don't really keep them too often, like Hopland Ancistrus, Cornfanes, Guyana Ancistrus. There might be actually regulations behind it. I'm really annoyed about this. I don't have footage for Decicera, which would be Decicera picta actually, rather than, I think it's no. So it's Decicera picta got combined with Decicera brachyura, I think it is. And they're the butterfly plecos, not to be confused with the loaches that get called butterfly plecos. What else? Neblincthes, never seen them in captivity. Beautiful. Oh my god, they're like the unicorn of plecos. They're beautiful. Large odontos, so those spines made of dentine. I think it's dentine on the head. Lichthos Ancistrus we don't see. And then I'll also ignore this clade here. You don't really see them in the aquarium trade. And also these Pseudancistrus here. Sidurus, amazing odontodes. So a lot of this clade is so amazing and they get ignored. They just don't get imported, and there might be regulations behind it. But some of these do appear, these Pseudancistrus. And I was particularly lazy, and I don't think it actually, but this is an example of a pseudoancistrus, and I can't remember where it places. This is Pseudoancistrus acerrini in its morph phase, and I just thought this was a really cool video just to show how different the coloration varies when they're... So you look at the normal fish and it actually looks like the golden nugget Bariancistrus xanthellus, almost like the sunshine. Scopinancistrus auratus, but this is the morph of it. They don't stay like this for long. What striking fish, and they do go gold. Absolutely beautiful fish. I imported a load like this. They all went back, apart from one had little faint bits of its old marking. But it shows how names don't always reflect actually their evolutionary relationships. So then that's I'm going to say the ones that branch out earlier, Loricariidae, just the underrated ones. Ancistrus has to be one of my favourites. It's just so diverse but so understudied. So it's like this sort of treasure box of species that sometimes appear, and if you can get them, like my L309, beautiful fish. So now we're looking at the last bit. So these are ones that are probably some of the most popular. Actually, no, these are the most popular Loricariidae in the trade, probably the most common. Maybe number Otosynchus kind of make it up, but still. So first we got the Acanthicus clade. This is larger, tends to be more aggressive, I guess. Larger, I say. Leprocanthicus is quite small. Tends to be more kind of... We don't really know about Acanthicus. It's listed as detritus in its diet. So it's a little bit more difficult. These are definitely pushing though towards gigantism. It has been proven in scientific studies that they are looking at gigantism. Megaloncistrus, you do see occasionally in the trade, it is a large fish. Acanthicus, the largest Loricariidae. These are, so the Adonis pleco. Hystrix doesn't get as big, but you're looking at a metre or more of pleco. So when people slate Pteroplectes, say, oh, get a Adonis pleco, it's like, yeah, you're getting something bigger. So Acanthicus, what it's known for, I think Acanthicus refers to these spines. This is a baby Acanthicus Adonis albino, not the best example, but you can see that even at this size, it's not something you want to pick up with these odontos. Especially there, these are lethal almost. I have handled a larger Acanthicus hystrix, and I had to wrap it in the fabric. It was a preserved specimen, but I had to wrap it in fabric to stop it scratching all the other fish. Absolutely striking fish, beautiful fish, but not for most aquarists. It's not something to aim to keep. Next we got Pseudoacanthicus. These are the real brutes. Nasty from a young age, but you can see these razor blades. Invertebrates, not really particularly specialist. This is Pseudoacanthicus pirara. So they're just cactus plecos will do. I would show Pseudoacanthicus serratus, but it's only photos of the juvenile. They're my favourite of the Pseudoacanthicus because they're solid black. They're basically goth fish. But you can see it here. And you've got a little blink. A lot of Loricariidae a lot of Hypostominae can do that. And the coloration really varies in the species based on catch locality. It's very similar to Patanga, which might be a sister. But you can see this longer. I guess somewhat similar to other clades, I guess, in that suction cup. So then the next of the Acanthicus clade is the little Lepocanthicus. These are maximum, the largest species I think is 24 centimetres standard length, so not really towards gigantism. This is such a mixed tank. So this is Lepocanthicus triactus, the three beacon pleco, very varied in markings actually. These are specialist molluscivores specialising in molluscs. Which molluscs we don't really know, but they have very unusual jaws, very elongate, very few teeth. So then next we're moving on to the Hemiancistrus clade. So Hemiancistrus clade is, you'll see loads of the other, the main Hemiancistrus are placed here. And the first one actually to branch out would be Hemiancistrus medians, I believe. But Hemiancistrus medians is, unless they've placed it somewhere else in this study actually. Hemiancistrus medians, I don't have a video for the live fish, so I won't show it, but it's very similar to Panac. And you could kind of, in this study they do branch it out actually as one individual clade. So the most actually no, they're almost all well known. So this is, these are the deeper bodied, these are the, they're one of my favourites, not as much as Ancistrus, but still. So next we have Panac. So you'll see, notice Panaclus is not in this clade, but Panac, these are the deeper bodied ones, these branch out first, just all head, no body. They are the largest. This is Panac Shafaro, goes to 60 centimetre standard length. These are real brutes, real heavy bodies, easily stunted. They need a lot of food. They naturally, I've got a video about it, I've got an article I'm writing about it. They feed largely on the microbes that grow within wood. They're really designed for breaking into that wood and going really deep into wood. Often this species is confused with Panac bathyphyllus. The markings are very different, and I think Panac bathyphyllus has white markings for longer. Panac bathyphyllus as an adult is much smaller. So then we're going inwards towards this Hemiancistrus clade, and then we've got the ones which are a bit of a mess. Or medians they've placed here. Have I placed it there? I don't know. So this contains Hemiancistrus Guahariborium, Panac dematoides, so the phantoms, the blue-green, the blue-black Panac. It's a bit of a mix. They all, I guess, used to be separated into respective ones. These aren't actually closely related to Hemiancistrus medians, but this is Hemiancistrus L128, the blue phantom. Very similar to the green phantom, possibly the same species, and also sister to Hemiancistrus dematoides, which is Baroncistrus dematoides, sorry, which is the hyphen green phantom, and I've just posted a video on them recently. If I actually posted that video, I will. There we go, look at it again. And then next, we obviously not got Hemiancistrus medians, and you'll see different trees, sometimes there's different placements. So next, this is not the greatest video, this is Spectroacanthicus punctassissimus. Does it have a common name? Not sure, I don't think so. But this large eyes, large dorsal fin, quite varied actually if you're not looking, as Zooananthi is one of the other common ones. Is that the polka dot pleco? But very distinctive fish. The dorsal fin seems to almost go on for ages with a larger head almost. It's very difficult to sort of compare. So notice we're now 50 minutes in to talk about plecos, and this shows how many there are. Like, you could get a quicker view if you just looked at the phylogeny, but it's up to, if you want to view this, it's up to you. So, let's see how many people could get this far into plecos then. So obviously Spectroacanthicus, it did, or some have hypothesised it in the Acanthicus clade. It is much more than the other species, and this shows that molecular phylogeny does have its own opinions. You might have seen in, I think it's Roxo 2019, they place it actually in the Acanthus clade, and sometimes there's different genes used. Here we have the Xanthopleco, so next very closely related, almost sister clades. This is a Parancystus aurantiacus, this is a true one. Xantho, chubby pleco, obviously you see beautiful Satan perky in the background. Wide-bodied, very wide-bodied, very flat. This is, I think it's a Altamira Zingu species. Large odontos on this specimen. Can't remember whether this might have been the female or the male. They're not the easiest to sex, and definitely don't look at odontos for sexy. I think this was a female. It looked male even down below, till for quite a while, but it was confirmed a male. But you can see this is absolutely a gorgeous fish. And the body, yeah, I do have Parancystus L322, which probably doesn't change colour, but a lot of the Parancystus can. You might also see Nudiventris, which is the polka dot pleco, which also the Punctassimus, I think it's called the polka dot pleco. Common names never work. I don't advise feeding mussels, particularly unless you're trying to get the fish actually feeding on something very high in diaminase, low in thiamine, vitamin B1. So then we look at the best genus within this group. These are the deeper bodied. These are the Bariancystus, the true Bariancystus, because Dermatoides doesn't place here, neither does Begini. Real big, but almost more Panac-like. Really hefty fish. This is a juvenile Xanthellus gold nugget L81. They're very specialised algivores. Lovely fish. They grow big, so 24 centimetres standard length minimum. They can get up to 30 centimetres, there's plenty in the wild. Maturing, breeding, I don't, that's the iffy one. So then we've done the Hemiancystus clade and we've done Acanthus. Let's go into Hypostominae. So these, maybe I should say these are the common plecos just to make the name easier. But then people are like, oh, it's plecostomus, Hypostomus plecostomus, not. And then it's like, well, nothing you're labelling as the common pleco is a common pleco, because the Hypostomus plecostomus isn't really in the trade, but Pteroplychthys is what most people label as the common pleco. So we have Gibiceps here, disjunctiva, so these are sort of the two very common ones. There's actually a lot more rarer ones. You've got some Hemiancystus here. The only true Hemiancystus is this medians, that is the type. So then we go, so that's the main ones of that clade, and this is going to be, we're probably not far from an hour. So here, this is, I believe this was a Paradalis actually, so this is Pteroplychthys paradalis, very well known as being called the common pleco. This is not a Hypostomus. This is probably the most common of that group. Along with Gibiceps, maybe Gibiceps is more common, and Josimanus, the gold spot Gibiceps plecosalvin. You can see it's absolutely, it's a nice fish, and there's some beautiful Pteroplychthys I should have included instead, just to show that they're still cool. And then, so then we've got Hypostomus, and I would have included Hypostomus luteus. Probably not the exact, I don't always want to include fancy ones. So this is Hypostomus basilisco, actually very similar to Saunier. Saunier has the white eyes, not the best photo or video for it. In the back we got, is it, oh god, the longer you last out of the trade, the more you forget fish that you don't really keep or are particularly interested in. Diadema? Oh, So this is of in the Cotylodonclade of Hemians Hypostomus. So Hypostomus basilisco. The Cotylodonclade is very similar to Panac. They have spoon-shaped teeth. They're designed to eat the microbes within wood. But you can see here it's got the higher body compared to the to a lot of other Hypostomus, but it's quite varied. There's 150 I think species of Hypostomus. Most we don't really see in the trade. Flavius I think we do, which is the honeycomb. But yeah, it's quite obviously very varied. But this is not. They vary a lot in size. I think it's 15 centimetres all the way up to 50 centimetres standard length. So we're getting to the end here. We've done the Hypostominae. Next we move on to the Picoltia clade or Pecotia. And if I go back here, please let me go back as my computer has a meltdown. Aphanotyrolus, so this is the thresher plecos. I should have a video somewhere of them, but I don't. I believe Siluriforme should be here, but they've now been separated, and the problem is with phylogenies is getting the samples for everything, so you might not have the samples for every clade or every species. So this is certainly not every species, as you can see. So I don't have any of the Aphanotyrolus, which is a very large fish. Almost substrate dwelling in a way. I guess they do feed on surfaces, but they do tend to sit at the bottom. They do have that suckermouth. Isorhynlocoria are very similar. Spectra Acanthicus, another one places here. Next we've got the... So this is maybe the more core of Picoltia. So we do have Picolticles bachi, that is, or bacchi. Oh, I should have footage for them because I've worked with them. They look almost like a cross between the Loricariidae and a, what's the word? Hoplosternum, hoplocat in a way. They are definitely not Calyctidae, but they do place here. So that's Picolticles bachi. Bachi is probably better. And then, so branching off first, we've got Hypensistrus. So Hypensistrus are the very well known, very popular. So this is Hypensistrus zebra. You can see the big eyes. They're generally reasonably small, anywhere from this sort of 5 centimetres to 15 centimetres standard length as species. Distinctively marked while young. Very large growth in this whole clade of Loricariidae, especially within the males. They're very sexually dimorphic. So then actually what also places within Hypensistrus, so this is Hypensistrus vandracti. So this used to be a microacanthicus until phylogenetic analysis actually placed it within Hypensistrus, which actually annoyed quite a lot of people. You see large odontogrowth there. It's a very unique species, but very interesting one too, especially phylogenetically. It just places where people least expect it, and it shows what features you really need to think about when you're thinking about morphological phylogenetics, and also maybe when it comes to ignoring certain sequences of DNA. But this is a Hypensistrus, just shows a bit of diversity within Hypensistrus. And this was taken actually at Peer Aquatics. So this is Ancystomus. Are there any other Ancystomus? Just checking. Not that I can see. But Ancystomus is very similar to Picoltia. I guess when you're looking at spotted Plecostomus, you kind of need to bear that genus in mind. And kind of speeding up here because definitely near an hour now. So next that obviously branches out, if I just show here, Scobin and Cistrus, so that's your sunshine plecos and sunshine plecos. I don't think the others actually L1, no, L543 or 453, no, L453, that's this species here. So sunshine pleco, which is all Scobenensis serratus, elongated mouth, specialised in mollusks most likely, very elongate teeth, looks almost like Leprocanthus. Beautiful fish. These are probably the largest of this clade, going to 30 cm standard length or more. Maybe not as feisty as actually a Canthicus clade, which they look very similar. You could easily be forgiven for placing them in that. They almost actually, Plecostomus sabagii, the parapleco, is very similar. And yeah, you can see this sort of very mobile jaw. So we're now very close to the end. Notice what I said about Panac. This is Panaculus and more closely related to Plecostomus. Very large donto growth. This is a male and it shows how large the donto growth can be in older males and how patterning really changes. The juveniles, most of them tend to have very wide bars, whereas it does tend to fade in the adults, and that goes across many of them, or it sort of greys out. Half of the grey is just because you see the dontos kind of blur it a little bit, make it look less distinctive. And then the last one, finally, is Plecostomus. This is Plecostomus oligospilla. The Panaculus earlier was albivermis, Plecostomus albivermis, but this is Plecostomus oligospilla. Really nice species. A lot of Plecostomus get very forgotten, apart from Compta, which is the leopard frog pleco. Does this have a common name? I don't know. Generalist algivores, lovely. Just very small. I would say generally averaging, the smallest has to be Compta. Largest, I guess, actually no, there are some 30 cm or larger. Sabagii is quite large, they're all 75, parapleco. But these are, the majority are about 15 centimetres of this genus, not of Sabagii. But, so that's a whistle-stop tour of Loricariidae, I guess. Because there's so many, and this just shows you cannot generalise Loricariidae at all. You cannot generalise plecos. It's such a large group. There's just so many. And it's almost like for cichlids saying African cichlids, you can't generalise Africa like in that way. These Loricariidae cover the whole of South America almost. And some in Central America. They go from lakes to river. There's riverine species, there's lotic species, so yeah, lakes. There's just so many, varying from that 1.8 centimetres to over 1 metre. And hopefully this is just a way of breaking up the different clades within Loricariidae. I don't know if people are going to watch the whole thing of this. I thought it would only be half an hour, and it's very difficult because you can't really include common names for this whole genus. Anyway, this whole family. I'm going to leave this here. And thank you for watching. If you like my videos, please comment, like and subscribe. And goodbye.